We'd like to welcome you to our Economic Summit this morning and like to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules for joining us today. To give our full attention to our speakers, this webinar is a listen-only event. All attendees are automatically muted and no views from video cameras will be shown. The Q&A session will be, we will hold a 15-minute Q&A session immediately following Natalie's presentation. Feel free to type your questions into the Q&A button on Zoom at any time during Natalie's presentation. However, we will save all the questions until the Q&A portion at the end of the meeting and answer them at that time. A video recording of this webinar will be available on our Facebook and Instagram pages later today. We'd like to thank Natalie Gochnour for joining us today. Natalie serves as an Associate Dean in the David Eccles School of Business at the University of Utah and as a Director of the Kem C. Gardner Policy Institute. She served in the administration of 3 Utah governors, Bangerter, Leavitt, and Walker, and was a political appointee in the George W. Bush administration. She authors regular columns in the Utah Business Magazine and in the Deseret News, and co-hosts a weekly radio program, Both Sides of the Aisle on KCPW. Once again, we'd like to thank Natalie for being here and welcome you all, and we'll turn the time over to her.
Thank you so much, Mark. Great to be with you this morning. I really miss my annual ritual of driving down to Provo to present at Central Bank's meeting. But today we are where we are, and I'm coming to you from my home in Murray, Utah. And I have a lot of great information I want to share with you. And so let me just go ahead and pop my slides up here. I have an opening slide. I'm going to walk through some economic insights in a time of uncertainty, but I wanted to start by just taking a pause for a minute and just really reflecting on the, historical and historic nature of this moment. This photograph is a work colleague of mine. On Monday, her second grader returned to school in the Salt Lake City School District in-class learning for the first time since March. This is 11 months of this second grader. He was doing some online schooling, but really had this incredible, shock to the system. And my work colleague told me that the night before he set out his clothes. And she told me that as they were walking in, he pulled down his mask for a minute and said, "Look, I'm smiling." And I guess he also had a little teddy bear for his teacher. But it was just a reminder to me as a working mother and working with a lot of other working mothers, and all of you can personalize this to your own experiences, but this has just been such a riveting time. And I just think it calls on all of us to, really tune in, to think about what can we do to make life better for those who are hurting and suffering. And I looked up these numbers this morning. Our state is at 348,000 COVID cases. We've had over 2 million Utahns tested, and many of them tested multiple times. Our state has administered 3.4 million tests in these 11 months. Our hospitalizations stand at 13,576. Right now, in Utah County, the number is 2,244 hospitalizations. And then just to honor that we've had over 1,600 Utahns pass away because of the virus. The good news is that we're getting through this, and we're rallying as a community, as a society. And I will just mention that to date in our state, we've administered over 325,000 vaccinations. And so that's really, the way we're going to get out of this, and we're well on our way. Well, I've got several economic insights that I want to share, and I've tried to just put these right up at the top And then I'm going to juxtapose them with a lot of data and quotes that I've collected over the course of this pandemic. Economists will call this a economic shock. Came from seemingly out of nowhere and created this sudden, very acute or deep and uneven impact. We still have uncertainty because of, mutations in the virus, because of, not knowing what, will there be another stimulus package? If so, what amounts? What about the structural changes that are occurring in the economy? The third bullet point is something that we should all be really proud of. Our state has fared better, really, economically than any other state in the nation. And because central bank has such a focus in Utah County, I realize much broader than that, but I just want to highlight that Utah County's performance has been particularly impressive. And I want to show you some data that shows that. We've got this 900 billion plus stimulus that President Trump signed in December that is currently making its way through the economy. And I think it did forestall what could have been a double dip recession. And it is my professional opinion that we'll need one more stimulus before this is over. And that, of course, is being debated in our nation's capital right now. But the good news is, and this will be a theme throughout this presentation, is that widespread vaccinations, pent-up demand, excess savings, these are the things that are about to come and are in process and will lead to an economic rebound by either mid 2021 or later in the fall. And that's the case for both Utah and the nation. So I mentioned that I have got some quotes for you. I'm an avid note taker. And since mid-March, I've been in a lot of economic discussions about COVID-19. And I've just kept my pencil sharp, collecting quotes that I think are pretty interesting. And this first quote is adapted from a Leo Tolstoy quote. He said, "You may not be interested in war, but the war is interested in you." And I think we have to acknowledge that we didn't want this, but it wants us, and it's here. Winston Churchill said, and I was in a meeting where a business leader reminded us of this quote, but he said, "If you're going through hell, keep going." And the idea is that the worst thing you can do is stop and do nothing. You have to keep moving through. So what does this acute, severe recession economic impact look like? Well, there you see it. And of course, what you're seeing is job change, annual job change, US and Utah. The US is in gray, Utah in red. And you can see this just really drop off a cliff. And then you can see this rebound. And this is why some people say this is, V-shaped. You can see that the V has tempered and it's starting to smooth out. I don't think a V-shaped is the accurate way to characterize this. But two things I want to really point out here. One is that Utah's economy, December jobs report, we now are one of 2 states that are actually expanding. We have more jobs in December of 2020 than we had in December of 2019. That's a year over measure, where the US is still 6% down. So that's one of the first things I'll point out. And I'll mention that second state is Idaho, so our neighbor to the north. I also want to point out that at our very worst here, maybe the bottom of this red line, we were about where the nation is today. So that's a really sobering thought, right? And when you see and hear about some of the economic challenges in our country, it feels different in most states than it feels in Utah. That's not to say that we haven't been through a lot, and this is maybe a way to show that. I'm showing year over job change in Utah going all the way back to 1980 in this graphic. That dotted gray line here at about 2.6%, that's our long-term historical average. And so you can see during this sort of this long expansion, we were exceeding our average, but you can see that 2020 hit and the Utah economy actually got smaller. And I use the line that if I could count on 6 fingers the number of times that Utah's economy's contracted on a year-over basis, and you're seeing 4 of them here. The other 2, one was after the Korean War, some adjustments in our defense industry, and another one, early in the 60s. So, but you also gain some perspective here, right? Because you see the Great Recession, how severe it was, and then came back up. And you can see that on an annual basis, ours was very severe for a few months, but it started to recover much more quickly. So when you average it out and annualize it, 2020 will go down as a 1.4 contraction. And just to remind you here, I'm not doing a 2020 number, I'm doing a December to December number. And here is the annual average for the entire year. Well, so that's that's a little bit on the challenge. But I've got a challenge quote that I want to share with you. And this came from Rick Rush, who's an analyst with CBRE. I was on the phone with him. He's out of Denver. And he said, the only thing that spreads faster than COVID is cabin fever. And what I wanted to point out is that everybody is impacted by this. And so when we look at job change state by state here, I mentioned that Utah's growing and Idaho growing. You can see the only 2 states there in white. Everyone else, as this virus just touched every corner of the country, the health impacts show up in the economic impacts, and you see some interesting things here. You see a state like Hawaii with a minus 13.5% job loss. That's because they're so specialized in tourism. You see a similar thing, though not as great, in Nevada, a minus 6.6%, the impacts on the gaming industry. You can see a lot of the energy states, struggling, that as energy is not done real well. But the real story here is that these 2 states in the mountain states, in the interior western United States, have found a way to grow again. So another characteristic of this downturn has been how uneven it's been. It's affected different people differently. So it's different by occupation, by geography, you see that in this map, by race, ethnicity, by income level, by gender. So I was in a meeting and someone said, I don't know who it was, I forgot, but they said, we are in the same storm, but we are not in the same boat. And if you were to pick an alphabet letter to characterize this downturn, I don't think it's a V, I don't think it's a U, I don't think it's a W, that's the double dip. I don't think it's an L, that's where you don't recover. But it's being widely thought of as a K-shaped recession. So I wanted to just illustrate that for you, and I'll let you just kind of look at this for a minute. This is just hypothetical, right? I mean, this is just an illustration, but trying to show that you got 2 groups of people prior to the downturn, and they're doing about the same. The shock hits, that's the gray area, and they both have an initial hit and reaction and plummet. But over time, one group, the red line, returns to pre-COVID levels and more. They actually find a way to flourish again. And another group does not and takes much longer. Now, this isn't to say that that gray line keeps going down. It'll eventually come back up. But in the near term, you have this separation effect, this split economy. So up on the upper side of the K are the tech giants, the Wall Street investors, e-commerce retailers, certainly communication services have thrived. In our state, construction has been our fastest growing industry. We continue to be a state that's building. So the construction sector has prospered. And because higher income households are associated with a lot of these occupations that have done well, they do well. Down here on the gray line, you start to see the arts, entertainment, recreation industry, the hospitality industry, multicultural communities, largely because of their occupations. You know, if you're a hotel service worker, if you're a waitress, certainly different industries, flight attendants, those have been hit really hard here. And I do want to note that second to the bottom bullet, pink collar or women, this will go down as a pink collar recession. And that's because the occupations hardest hit are dominated by women. I mentioned food service workers, hotel service workers, flight attendants, but even some of the occupations that have been in demand but have been so impacted, like school teachers and nurses. So we could talk all morning about this K-shaped. So on the unevenness theme, here is the breakout by industry in Utah. And there's a lot of interesting stories here. I'll highlight that leisure and hospitality and natural resources, that's our energy sector, mining sector, both contracted by 13% December to December. But what's the real story here is we've had several industries, I'll count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that are growing. This same graphic for the United States has every industry in decline. Every industry in decline. And so this is really a story for our state, right? What is it that's made it so that we could do relatively well even through the struggle? So we have this unevenness, but we're doing much better than the nation. I'll try to keep answering that. This is the same data, but instead of percent change, it's the absolute change by industry. And I wanted you to see how the construction sector's added 6,900 jobs in the last year. And trade, transportation, utilities added 14,000 jobs in Utah. But then this devastating 20,000 plus loss of jobs in the leisure and hospitality sector. That's really hard. And so when you see this, it raises all sorts of questions about what the right, response is. These impacts, these people don't deserve this, right? They didn't do anything to cause this. It wasn't because of their decisions. This is something that came from seemingly out of nowhere and impacted people not because of their fault. Well, continuing on the unevenness theme, and I'll just remind you as I'm sharing these things, please go ahead and populate the Q&A box. You'll see that on your Zoom. Usually it's to the lower right. But if you kind of look for that gray bar where the mute and this, and I don't know what you're seeing, but you'll have a Q&A box that you can tap and submit some questions. This one requires some unpacking, and it's a little difficult to see what's going on here, but I'm still on this theme of the unevenness of this downturn. And this is US data, but it would be similar here in Utah, just not to these magnitudes. But what we've done is we've said, okay, you've got jobs in the economy, and we've put them into quintiles. The highest paying quintile, second highest, middle, fourth, and lowest. So of these 5 categories, how did they do over time? So in February, we index them, they're all the same, right? February is the starting point. But the virus hits and contractions begin to occur. And what this is showing you is that the lowest paying quintile has had the greatest impact or loss in jobs. And then the 4th lowest quintile has the next, and you can just play it right on up from there. And so this is, again, part of the K-shaped recovery, that not everybody's in the same boat. I thought you'd find that interesting. And then I just want to show you some actual data here, not the dotted lines, but this is the real data for the US. What happened, the percent job loss since peak. So it dropped, got down to a 14% job loss. It's been coming back up. It's slowed and it's flattened. And what we're seeing is different groups will recover at different rates, hence the sort of stylized K there. Well, I hope that was interesting. The next thing I want to share is just a little bit about the state's response. And Governor Herbert, multiple times said, united we succeed, divided we fail. And he led a response that while imperfect and while certainly there's things you would change, has really served our state quite well. And I wanted to just give you an example of what outside investors, outside business interests see when they look at metropolitan areas all around the country. I did not create this map. I pulled this right from the Bureau of Labor Statistics website. It's employment change by metro area. And if you're red, those are the ones that are suffering the most. So you see the woes in California and in New England. And then the shades of orange get less and less. But the blue dots are places where you have metro areas that are actually expanding. And isn't this interesting to see that Utah, interior Western United States story unfold, where you see the blue metropolitan areas, and even where they're not blue, they're the lighter tan. And so, you know, this is a state that has done really well. And I'll say relatively speaking. I wanted to just zero in a little bit on Utah County and let you kind of think through this a little bit. So what I've done here is just shown you a job growth rates for varying counties. So we've got the state over here at 0.6, so expanding again. Weber County still in decline, Salt Lake County still in decline, and I'll remind you that Salt Lake County is the center of arts, entertainment, recreation, cultural capital for our state, the front door to our economy in terms of visitors. So no surprise that there's a 3.2% contraction there. Wasatch County is related to the ski sector and tourism and whatnot, so we see a drop there. But what really is just unbelievable is to see Utah's second largest county, Utah County, having a 1.4% job growth rate over this period, more than twice the U.S. average, more than twice the state average, and really outperforming its peers, right? That Davis, Weber, Salt Lake, nothing compared to what Utah's done. And I cherry picked, I was trying to pick counties in the, dominant urban area, but Tooele County is the only one that's been able to match what Utah County's doing. Show this a couple other ways. This is the new 2020 population estimates. These were released in early December. And so, we're basically saying what was the population in 2019, what is it in 2020, and what's the growth rate? And again, I'm showing some of the similar peers here. State of Utah grows by 1.6. Utah County's hitting the 3% and is the fastest growing county in this, greater Salt Lake area. So just, again, really interesting story. You have a nation that's struggling. You have a state that's now expanding, and you have one part of the state, Utah County, that is really leading the way. And this has, of course, been a theme for the last 2 or 3 years as I have presented to central bank customers. Well, one other way of looking at it, I know I'm beating the Utah County theme, but I know a lot of you have business interests in Utah County, and I'd be sharing this outside of Utah County because it is a big part of the economic story in our state right now. But we look at net migration, and this is for Utah County. So there's always people moving in, always people moving out, but on net, are you gaining or losing? And you're gaining. You don't always gain. Sometimes Utah County has more people move out. But for the last 6 years, it's about 48,000 new Utah County residents because of migration. That's in 6 years. And I will just note that the population of American Fork is about 34,000. Pleasant Grove is about 39,000. Spanish Fork is just over 40,000. So in 6 years, you've added one of those communities to Utah County. Well, I hope this is proving to be helpful, instructive to what you're thinking about. Another quote that I picked up was Dr. Mark Harrison. This is the head of Intermountain Healthcare, and he said, you got to know that there is no Calvary coming. It is us. So it's this imagery of, we're in trouble, and is a cavalry going to show up over the hill and come in and save us all? And Dr. Harrison's reminding us that that's not how it works. It is us, meaning our behavior, our decisions, our adaptations. And then one of my mentors, former Governor Mike Leavitt, former Secretary of Health and Human Services, he went through the avian flu. I worked with him back in Washington during the avian flu. This is the H5N1. It never took off like this one has, but it had all of the workings of it. But he reminded me at one point during our state's response that nobody looks good in a pandemic. And I think it's just a really important lesson, right? You can look good one day and you won't look good the next, because pandemics are so brutal in terms of what they're able to do and the way they're able to challenge leaders. And I don't know if that's been the case in your business, that you've sometimes felt like, wow, we out strategized this, and then something will happen and you're on the losing side. And I think this is just a call to humility, that the cavalry's not going to save us. It's up to us. And then we're going to make mistakes as we respond. My dean, Taylor Randall, is the dean of the David Eccles School of Business. He is in charge of the state's economic response. He was asked by Governor Cox to do that. But he made the point that when you focus on one problem, you lose perspective. And this is the idea that if you only think about the health side, you're not able to make the decisions on the economic side. And if you only look at the economic side, you miss out on the health side. You have to take a more holistic view and keep perspective as you make decisions. So I thought that was interesting. I was also in a meeting where the Speaker of the House, Brad Wilson, in speaking of the limitations of government, reminded us that no amount of money will solve this problem. We have to get people back to work. So this is this idea that this was so severe that you're not going to be able to print money and get people out of this, right? This is going to require adaptations and grit and hard work to get us through it. So we've spent a lot of money, but it takes more than that. It takes individual action. I thought this would be worth sharing. To the extent there is the semblance of a cavalry, it's all of the aid that has come from our national government, and it has been unbelievably significant. I don't have the slide in this deck, but I'm going to say that in July of 2020, we looked at all of the federal money that had come into our state as a percent of second quarter GDP. It was 22% of Utah's GDP just came in to help bolster us. This took the form of the PPP loans and different unemployment insurance aid. And this table, this is not the full stimulus package. This is just the December one, but it gives you a sense of what the federal government's been doing. And I will tell you, I've looked at the aid that's been provided in Europe and in South America and other countries. No country has provided as much aid as the United States of America, and as much aid to states and to individuals and to households, to businesses. And arguably we needed it because it's hit us harder than a lot of other states or other nations. But this is the kind of thing that we're doing to get us through this. I'm going to share another quote from Taylor Randall, and pretty close here to opening it up for questions. But he tells the story of a business study that looked at shipwrecks in the 16 and 1700s. And they studied over 20 different shipwrecks to find out which ones survived. And they found that the common element of those who survived was people who looked after the well-being of others, altruism. So I just think that's a really positive thing. Well, so now I want to just transition to what's next. And this same analyst that I spoke to with CBRE, he specializes in tourism. So I'm really interested in that because it's been so hard hit. He said there is so much backed up behind the dam that when the dam breaks, be ready. So this is this idea that there's pent up demand. Now he was speaking specifically about leisure and hospitality, but it's there, that we're ready. We want to get out of this. So one of the things we look at is consumer confidence, and we measure that monthly now in our states. So this gray is U.S. confidence, comes out of the University of Michigan, and it was about, the index was over 100 in February, and you can see it dropped as low as 71.8, and it's just kind of been working its way, but it's really just sort of stagnant here around 80. No surprise, we don't have Utah data pre-October. We've just started this, but we do a similar measure, and our confidence is higher than the nation, but still has a long ways to go. And we've not seen the burst in confidence that it's going to take for that pent-up demand to reveal itself. You'll hear me use the term excess savings, and we have evidence that people are saving a lot of money. So on that upper side of the K, there's a lot of people that have continued to have income, and they're holding it. They're not traveling, they're not making major purchases. Many of them are holding it. And as they hold it, that means that we've seen more savings. Of course, it affects all of our financial institutions because they're awash in deposits. But I just wanted you to see that the estimate is that there's, somewhere around, $1.4 trillion of excess savings in the U.S. economy, and something similar, not in magnitude, but in percentage terms in the Utah economy. So you've got, the way I would frame it is, you've got consumer confidence that's got to start to rise. You've got excess savings, and then you have the vaccinations. And so I've just tried to show here that we're trying to get from contraction to expansion. And you've got vaccinations taking their course, going through healthcare responders, the K through 12 staff, and kind of working their way across. Then you have all of the business adaptations. We're wearing masks, we're social distancing, we're involved in remote work, we're doing takeout dining, but all these things are progressing towards expansion. Then you've got the stimulus that's coming, and has been coming for months now, to help get us to expansion. And then you've got the mechanics in the market of the rising consumer confidence, pent-up demand, excess savings, hopefully no setbacks. And this, to me, is the path to recovery. And so the way I want to end this, and then I'll open it up for questions, is to say that we're on our way. So I've shown you this graphic before, this red line. This is the current US downturn. It's basically the percent job losses since the peak and where we're at. I'm showing here in blue, tan, and black the last 3 recessions. Look how different our profile is. These are more like smiles, right? So the question is, where does this red line go? Where is it going next? And what I'm showing you here is the Moody's forecast is this green line, that by May of 2021, we're back to 0. That doesn't mean that we're spring, but we're back to 0. We've gotten to the jobs that we've lost, and then we move on from there. And I just put in these other scenarios that it could be a little quicker and it could be longer, but we are on our way. And that's a message I want to share. So the Utah Economic Council has a forecast for our state. I'm showing you that forecast here. So you've got the fact that we fared better than other states. We're getting vaccines in arms. We've got our pent-up demand, our excess savings, inventory rebuilding. The inventories to sales ratios are incredibly low, so we're rebuilding our inventories. We think that consumer confidence will be improving. We've got the federal stimulus. And so what happens is the 2021 is the yellow here. In every case, it looks pretty good with this exception. In personal income, I know my internet went unstable there for just a minute, so I'm hoping you're hearing me okay. But this big red line here is all of the federal stimulus that came into the state. So I'll just close by sharing just 3 other quotes. Theodore Rothke, a poet, said, "In a dark time, the eye begins to see." And I believe that we are getting through the dark time and we're beginning to see. Rogers of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood said, "When you think you're at the end of something, you're at the beginning of something else." And that's where we are. And then one of the most prolific economists in our nation, Mark Zandi, has said that for the first time since the pandemic hit, there appears to be a clear path to a full economic recovery. It won't be an easy, given the longer term economic fallout from the pandemic. we're finally on our way. Well, that's the message I wanted to share with you today. I hope that that's meant something to your businesses, to the things that you're hearing. So I'm just going to go ahead and open up the Q&A, just kind of riff for a minute about some of the questions I'm seeing. One person says, I'm perplexed by the job losses in the information sector in Utah. What makes up this sector? It's surprising to see a job loss in this area. That is a really fair question. So this goes back to the question, and I actually will pull up my screen again to just show you this. This goes back to the industry look here. And so what the person's asking about is this graphic here where they see information declining by 5.8%. And what I would just say is that industry is up and down in terms of these growth rates. Sometimes it's positive, sometimes it's negative, and I would not read too much into that. Let's watch what it does again next month, because there's just some seasonality to it and some things, and our information sector is growing, and our information sector is largely our tech industry. Another person asks, could you also discuss the unequal impact on women in the workforce, which isn't shown, that more women had to quit their jobs to help out at home versus men? Well, that is part of the pink collar recession. And we know, we call it labor force participation rates. So you're of the age that you're working, and you're either working or actively looking for work. And we've had the labor force participation rate for women plummet. And it's because women made the choice to provide either care for children in the early years or homeschool their children. And so the impact on women is really serious, right? Because your long-term career trajectory often depends on your continuity in the workforce and your seniority in the workforce and what you're doing in the workforce. And so there's considerable evidence that the professional development of women has experienced a setback. So I like the question there. Someone asked, is there a metric that shows a shift from the job loss categories to the categories growing? How many of the tech new jobs are being filled by new move-ins to Utah versus transfer from one industry to the other? Offhand, I do not know of a metric that captures that. But I will say that just like I showed you net in-migration to Utah County, that's significant. Utah has been seeing over 24,000 net in-migration for the past 5-6 years. So we've added a lot to our state, and presumably they're taking the jobs that are growing, and the sectors that are growing in our state over that time period have been tech, and have certainly been construction. I think those would be the two that have been most impacted by migration. Another person asks, with the economic impact of COVID so unevenly distributed, is the average impact a national recession, and what drag on the economy will the repayment of stimulus debt have? Okay, 2 questions there. I'm going to just say that the average impact is definitely a recession, right? It will be known as the pandemic recession or the COVID-19 recession. And in our country, we have a formal process that dates the timing of recessions, and they've dated that we're in it. They haven't dated that we're out of it. So on average, yes, it's a recession. And then the debt question is incredibly serious. What I would say to you is that what's more serious is if we don't keep our economy whole right now. Like, we have no choice right now but to keep bolstering up businesses and households, people who have suffered. The pain would be so much worse if we didn't. But we will have a reckoning in terms of paying back the debt. And just the good news is that interest rates are low and inflation's low. And so the big important thing is that we have to move forward in a way that addresses the debt issue. Okay, it's hard for me to keep track of all of the questions. So, but someone's asking this, and I hope this is working all right. And I'll just ask the central bank team to message me if you want me to try this in any kind of different way. But someone's asking, to what extent is Utah's economic growth attributed to the good things that Utah does? So our business practices, responsible government, versus its geographic location near states that are struggling due to high cost of living or other challenges. I like to tell people that one of the reasons we fared well is that we went into this well positioned. You know, we were a strong economy going into this. So that's just great, right? That's just, you know, I don't know if that's luck, but that's the truth. Second point I would make is that we know that our economy is very diverse. It is the most diverse state economy in the country. Now, different times you might measure that we're second or third, but the last time we measured it, we were number one in economic diversity. It just means that we have a little bit of everything. We have warehousing and distribution. We have tourism. We have mining, manufacturing, defense, tech, agriculture. And, you know, there's some that I'm not mentioning. Well, because our economy is so well diversified, this recession went after leisure and hospitality. And oil, gas, and mining been really hard hit because of slower global demand for oil and things like that. So those economies have really suffered that are specialized in those areas. And in our state, you know, we kind of even that out. Tourism's really important here, but there's other things that are contributing. And then I would just also add that the questioner said, you know, responsible government and responsible business practices. I think we have to give Utah businesses enormous credit for their adaptations, for the way they've responded, for the way they've adapted. And then I will give former Governor Gary Herbert a lot of credit. He had a published economic response plan out on the streets by March 24th. So just think about that, right? You know, I don't remember when the Rudy Gobert test positive, but I think it was, I don't know, March 12th, 13th, somewhere in there, 14th. But by the 24th, Gary Herbert had a plan, and then he revised it multiple times. So I think our response has been admirable. Someone asked, do you know what Washington County is growing at? Washington County was the fastest growing county in 2020. I believe the growth rate was about 4.7%. So the state, this is population. So the state growing about 1.6. I can't remember what we had Utah County at, but Washington County is back in a very high growth phase. And if you want to learn more about it, you know, I mean, study Washington County a little bit more, go to gardner.utah.edu. That's the website for the Gardner Institute, and you can find county level data there. Someone asked, do you see a correlation between job growth and dominant political party-led counties? I don't know the answer to that one, so I guess I won't answer it. But I will say that I do stand by the quote I said that nobody looks good in a pandemic. And so to the extent that we want to attach it to sort of some political leanings, it changes day to day. Someone asks, real estate industry, housing supply and affordability, Utah County. So I'll read into that to just say that we already know that construction is the fastest growing sector in our state economy, at least, you know, over the long term, it has been for our state last few years. We continue to have a housing shortage. We're you know, taking from it, meaning it's getting less and less. But we still have a housing shortage, and that's one of the reasons why we continue to have such incredible demand. People are moving into our state. We have a high natural birth rate that, you know, creates new households, and then we have all this demand for housing that's raising prices. And housing affordability is, if it's not the first or second or third biggest problem in the state, it's right up there. I believe our analysis showed that housing price appreciation in Utah in 2020 went up by 11%. So just think of that. You know, that growth rates of 1%, 2%, and 3% are respectable, and housing price appreciation of 11% in 1 year. Someone's asking, why are Utah and Utah County growing so quickly? Are people moving from California or other places? Where's the growth coming from? So, there's growth that's population, and there's growth that's economic, and I want to deal with the economic first. Utah County is growing fast because it has so much buildable land supply, and it's right in the heart of urban activity, right? It has buildable land supply that's in great proximity to the markets. And if you look at Salt Lake County, even better proximity to things like the international airport and the central, business district and all those sorts of things. But it's getting built out. We have the southwest corridor, kind of where Harriman is. There's still some, build out there, and we have the part out by the northwest quadrant where the prison and the inland port will go. But Salt Lake County is building out, is almost built out, and very expensive and harder to redevelop than to do fresh development. So Utah County is the beneficiary right now of great proximity and available land. On the demographic side, we definitely get a lot of people from California, and it's not new. People have been moving from California for decades because of high regulation, high taxes, housing affordability. California is the big kahuna in the West, and we get a lot from California. Last time I looked, of our gross flows of migration, about 25% of our gross flows come from California, far more than any other state. This person asks, what sectors of Utah's economy could be strengthened to make the state more resilient to external shocks, whether it be a pandemic, changing government policies such as climate, energy, or other factor that could result in a recession? Does Utah have a good balance of economic sectors, or are we unevenly balanced? I think I've sort of answered that to just say that we are very balanced. We have a very diverse economy. But the person does ask, where could we be strengthened? And I'll tell you, the place that I would focus on is our energy sector. It's an exciting industry that has so much happening in terms of renewable energies and new and clean energies, and that's really the future. And so I think states and economies that position themselves and invest and tap into where energy is headed, not where it's been, but where it's headed, will be advantaged over the long term. This person asks, what is the long-term effect of having a national deficit that exceeds our GDP? I tell people, Scott Dunn asked this, Scott, I tell people that the debt is not like the wolf at the door that's going to blow your house down, but it's rather termites in the woodwork. It's behind the scenes working at it, and over time it's creating a real problem. So it crowds out private investment because the public sector is borrowing so much. It can crowd out important government spending, right? If you're spending so much of the federal budget on interest, you're not able to invest as much in infrastructure or human needs. So it crowds out that. But it also, has a moral side to it, right? Why would we put so much on future generations? And so it's, I have really strong feelings about this one. And what I hope happens is that we get some sanity back and get through this pandemic and have a deficit reduction plan that is embraced by Congress, but it doesn't feel very likely. This person asks, construction jobs are notably up. Is there a feeling that a few unique projects are driving that, or that it's a real trend? And then the person mentions the airport, I-15 in Utah County, some downtown office towers. And do I see a downturn in construction jobs coming as these non-market players complete large projects? I will just say that at the Gardner Institute, we have a housing construction and real estate practice area where we, collect building permits and where we analyze different aspects of best practices and the like. And we are not seeing cause for concern at this point. We feel like the growth in construction is solid and meeting fundamentals. So, a lot of us were worried about the airport finishing and then what next, but we got a prison that we're building, and you get worried that this is happening. Now we're building a convention headquarters hotel. And so I'm not one that's worried about that. Hope I'm right. This person says, what should the rest of Utah be doing or improving to follow the example of Utah County in terms of the labor market and job growth? You know, I would just say that I just think it's a different reality for Utah County right now. I don't think, you know, Morgan County or, you know, Cache County should change something they're doing to be more like Utah County. It's just market dynamics. And right now, the market is on the side of Utah County. Okay, how did each state's response to the pandemic affect the economy of different states, red versus blue? Hard for me to do the red versus blue thing. And I'm just going to stand by it. There were times when Utah was like looking so good on the health front. And then there's times when we've looked so bad. And the same thing in New York. And California has mostly looked bad, you know, despite being a warm climate and things. But I'm just going to go by saying that pandemics fundamentally shift everything. And they have more power than political party. They have more power. And so as an economist, it's just hard to read into the data as much as the question would have me. What is your definition of excess savings? You know, what we're looking at is what would savings typically be in normal times, and then what is it today, and then we compare those. So I'd have to look to see normal times, how far back we go back, but my guess is it's 2 to 3 decades. Okay, we're at 9:22, getting close here. I'll do a few more here. What are the realistic options for repaying the stimulus and other debt? You know, the most important option there's two, is fixing entitlements, reforming entitlements. So this can be things like taking Social Security. People are living longer. Modern medicine helps people live more comfortably. People work longer, so change the Social Security age. That's an example of a reform that you could do. So the realistic options are reform and entitlements. And then the second one would be economic growth can really help us. I don't think it's sufficient, but it can really help us.
Natalie?
Yes.
This is Seth with Central Bank. In looking through the questions, there are several regarding the real estate market, wages staying the same, rentals and purchase costs going up, and just the inability for new homeowners to get out of rentals and into homes. So there's a lot of real estate related questions. Would you mind tackling that for a minute?
Yeah, and hard for me to give as much specificity as the question requires, but I will just say that I mentioned that housing price appreciation and housing affordability are incredibly significant issues right now for the legislature. And I think that you will see a generational investment by the time this session's over of one-time funds to bolster up some of the ways to help with gap financing, to put money into the Olene Walker Housing Trust Fund, and various ways that government can at least try to lead the market towards more construction, more availability, preserving of affordable units, those sorts of things. So Seth, it's absolutely right that people are asking these questions, because this is a risk area for the market, and it's not as much of a risk for the builders, in my opinion, but it's a risk to the broader economy for households that aren't able to start creating wealth through home ownership, and who are not able to realize their dreams because of their living arrangements. Seth, is there a couple others you'd like me to tackle, or you want me to do maybe one or two more from the Q&A line?
At this point, yeah, go through the Q&A line, and we will end in about 5 minutes here.
Great. A person's asked a question that I can't resist asking about the minimum wage. What impact do you anticipate we would see if the national minimum wage is raised to $15? I have a millennial son, and he really wants that minimum wage to be increased, and it's not because of him. It's just that, you know, he's bought into this idea that we should have more government in our lives. I guess I'd just say it that way. You know, I don't think that is good policy. I think there's way too much variability, state to state, metro area to metro area, to impose that kind of minimum wage nationwide. I like giving states a lot more control over things like that. One of the best examples is, you know, we have a very young state, and a lot of our employment is to help people learn to work and to have them working. Where a $15 wage is too much for some companies to pay, and so they just won't employ these young people. And as you know, we have a shift towards automation and digitization. Look at what Walmart's doing with their robot stores, and companies will replace labor with capital if they're pushed into it. So I don't mind a minimum wage that's reasonable, but I oppose one that's that high imposed on so many. So that's a personal economic answer to that. Reasonable people can differ. I'll just do two more. This person says, assuming the projection of economic recovery in May is accurate, will we start to see a slowdown or a flattening to the rapid cost increases to the Utah construction and housing market? So I don't think so. And the reason I don't think so is I think that everything I'm seeing is telling me that Utah is going to come out the other side of this and be very much a growth market. And as we're a growth market, we will have all of those same competitions for labor and materials and the like. Now, I could be wrong, but we're just not seeing things that would tell us that Utah is going to lag or not lead. Instead, what we're seeing is that Utah will continue to be at the top of the class in terms of economic performance. Okay, I'm going to do one more question, and then I'll turn it back to Central Bank and to Mark, if I think that's who I'm going to go to. This person said, you said that you would recommend another round of stimulus. However, in a different part of your presentation, you said that one of the drivers of the growth and demand is the high savings rates right now. Can you comment on the correlation? There seems to be a conflict. I want to be really clear that, you know, I'm in the camp similar to Senator Romney, where you want stimulus to go to the places where it needs to go, and you want to not spend this money on places where it's not efficient or helpful. So unemployment insurance is one of the better places that we can spend this, right? Because it's targeted to people who are unemployed, and it helps preserve those households and, you know, alleviates so much pain and different costs, whether it's, you know, mental health issues and whatnot. So that's a good use of the money. These direct payments that go to individuals that aren't in need, I think that's not a good use of the money. And what you want with the payments is you want to stimulate, right? You want to create things. If people get money and put in a savings account, it's not having a stimulative effect. So that would be how I'd reconcile them, is that I think we're going to need one more stimulus, but it will mostly be to pay for vaccinations and to help with, you know, state and local government needs, and to go to people and businesses truly in need, targeted. With that, I just want to let Central Bank know how I really appreciate this opportunity. I think you all know that Central Bank makes a contribution to a scholarship fund, which warms my heart that we're able to do that as part of this morning's gathering. And to all of you, thanks for your interest, and I hope I get to see you next year.
Thank you, Natalie. We really appreciated you taking time out of your busy schedule and being with us today, and the wonderful presentation that you gave us. We really do appreciate it. We are, like Natalie said, going to be donating some money to the Kempsey Gardner Policy Institute, and actually encourage all of you to do the same. What a great thing to be able to donate to education. So we encourage all of you online to express your appreciation the same way. So thank you very much. We appreciate you being here and hope that you have a wonderful day.